what we aim to do is just to give the Indigenous significance of the harbour itself to the visitors, many visitors that come out to our country and from inland and mainland Australia to come and check out Sydney Harbour instead of just seeing it as a, forgive me how I say it, but seeing as a, well, from a non-Indigenous point of view.
This traditional name for this area is Wockenmagalli. Wockenmagalli meaning Crow Headland. It's where the British actually first colonised, down at the end of the bay here. They first attempted to colonise at a place called Botany Bay, which is a neighbouring harbour from here. But Botany Bay, the land and the waters proved inhabitable. But when the landing party attempted to land, the Aboriginal people threw stones and spears at the landing party, and they returned musket fire, and they wounded one of the Aboriginal men. And it was at that stage, there and then, that they realised that maybe something was happening here. Okay folks, we are coming to a very popular photo site here. You'll find many a postcard with this image on it. If you have a camera, please take this opportunity to take this photo.
Excuse me, can you just...
Since the European occupation until very recently, government policy relating to Aboriginal people has been designed and implemented by non-Aboriginal people, and the common justification for most policies for Aborigines was that it was for their own good. But it's now clear that none of the policies have actually made the condition of Australia's Indigenous people any better than it was prior to the arrival.
Redfern, and Redfern, the block, has been like the identity of the Aboriginal community for, well, it's an identity in Sydney which everyone knows. It's been a strong Aboriginal community for many years. Now what it's become right now, if you look at a lot of the housing here, it's sort of become the opposite, and not for our own fault in many ways, At the moment you look at these places and you look at them, they're a wreck, but to me, you know, they indicate all those things I talk about, dispossession, about people not having an understanding where they fit in. Everywhere else is being developed, and there's money injected into their area. We're getting left behind. I reckon, you know, in a lot of ways, we are in a lucky country, but you still see so many bad things. There's an intervention in the Northern Territory. If you're on some sort of benefit out there and you're black, you're going to be affected by it. They'll quarantine your money. If you're black and you're out there on a benefit and you maybe even went served in the war for this country, you can't drink. You don't have a choice. In the dictionary, apartheid is when you're setting one set of rules up for one nationality or one race, and the good set for the other. And for us, we ended up with the bad set again. It takes away our independence, it takes away our identity, and it doesn't deal with any of our issues.
Racism, this is Australia. They're trying to character assassinate all the men and all the respectable families that live here. This is bullshit. This is un-Australian. The rest of the world, you've got to take notice and see what these dickheads are doing to us. This is character assassination for all decent Aboriginal families in Australia. There's no need for this. It is shocking what's going on here. This is apartheid and the false pretenses of protection of children and protection of everybody. This is oppressing Aboriginal people more than they've ever done in the history of this country, other than shooting us. There, that can go and they're going to stick it up their arse.
It is good to have it taken down. We don't need it. Yeah, go and take them down. They shouldn't be up there.
I lived with this family when I was a little kid like these ones here, and they're respectable people. Yep, and I know them. I know the grandparents, I know the parents, and I know all the children. They're respectable people. You've got to talk to us at least. Not coming along putting this disgusting thing. That's only reinforcing racism within the community of Alice Springs, which is getting worse. Right?
Anybody wants to come and give me some love, man? Nobody going one, Lord.
Yeah. Spare sheets and stuff if there's none.
I beg your pardon?
I bought some spare sheets and
Oh, don't worry about me and all the kids. I have kids here all the time, so I'm prepared with everything. Yeah, I've got lots of blankets, lots of sheets, lots of everything. All right, remember what we spoke about today?
Yes. Yes, sir. Not Tuesday.
Connie, Alema, Davina, Cecilia, Thornton, Adrian, Junior, Tara.
You gonna go, you little one? Hey, baby, you gonna go? Yeah. Yeah.
They go a long way.
And in the Northern Territory, authorities are keeping a close eye on the Catherine River at Catherine. The river is due to peak this evening, but it's not expected to threaten the township. The Catherine River catchment area received heavy rain of almost 200 mm.
I've just put the kids on the bus to go on a camp out bush with the youth department of Tangentyere Council. Every house here has got children and they all come to my house. Don't know why, I guess I'm just a fun-loving auntie, I guess. If this government was really worried about Aboriginal people and their children, the new policies that was brought out last year with the intervention had got nothing to do with saving children, and it's got nothing about education and employment, training, everything that we lack and other people have. You got drug and alcohol problems throughout Australia, and you probably got a lot of child abuse that happens behind closed doors in other non-Aboriginal races. So, I don't know.
So you believe the law is racist?
Yes, it is racist. It is racist, and it's racist because it's a new law for Aboriginal people, not anyone else.
The police, they come around, they just do their random checks to see if like drinking and all that sort of things, because we're not allowed to drink in our own yard no more. Not even allowed to, straight after work, knock off work, we're not even allowed to have a beer even though we buy it from the shop. A white man, if he was to drink that in his yard, they'd just drive past, hey mate, g'day mate, we're true blue Aussies, you got your stubbies on mate? Yep, no worries. What's hanging on the barbie? Yeah, no worries fellas, have another beer for me, you know? Yet as soon as a Aboriginal fella's there having a beer, it's, oh, let's go over there, tip his beer out, he's not allowed to have a beer.
Quarantine law? The quarantine law, it gives me the bloody shits. It pisses me off. I mean, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've been to Vietnam twice. I've been to Malaya and Borneo. I served with the British forces against the Indonesian confrontation. I went there, fought there, 18 months. And I come back here, and you know what I said? I feel like I'm living like a refugee in my own country. I can't do what I want to do. I can't even have a beer in my own yard. Why shouldn't I be able to drink inside my house? I know I'm not allowed to drink in my own house because my wife has a rule that I can't drink or smoke inside the house. So I carry out my social life in terms of drinking,
and smoking outside with my children and all my old relatives who come from bush. I can't even invite my white friends that I served in the army to come here and sit in my front yard because they're not allowed to. This is me. I'm the one here. I'm the one who's got a bit of colour. You know, Aboriginal people served in every conflict that existed that Australia was involved with. What's happening tomorrow? This old lawman here, this old lawman is getting young men to go away for ceremony, following their own culture, their own law, They go and sit down for a few days, and then they go through ceremony, and then they become men, like that, what the Jewish mob call them, bar mitzvah, You can go with him. He invited you, this old elder, boss man, to go and be part of his ceremony.
No doubt there's an issue with alcoholism. We've been trying to tackle this alcohol problem for many years. You need to look at the predispositions of people, the barriers within their life. People don't pick up a can of beer or a bottle of liquor for the sake of it. There are problems in people's lives, and if people can't knock down a brick wall or go around a barrier, then alcohol seems the better step to take. The offences are very high in terms of fines. I believe at the end of the day they're going to have to build another prison within the Northern Territory. There's 2 prisons at the moment, and they're going to have to build 2 more because people are going to be fined. Low income earners are going to be fined. I'd say the prison population within the Northern Territory, both prisons, you're looking at 90% Aboriginal people.
I finally bought a house in Alice Springs.
Where were you before?
We were renting for 12 months after we came back to the Northern Territory. Yeah. So here we are. This is a picture of my grandmother, Hetty Perkins, and in the background is the bungalow or the old Alice Springs telegraph station. My grandmother was the cook, and they looked after all the children who were forcibly removed from their families, the stolen generations. She's my father's mother, and also the mother of Charles Perkins, who is my uncle, the late Charles Perkins, and probably one of Australia's best known black activists. And I'm sure it was from him that we all learnt how to have the fire in our belly and to stand up for our rights.
What sort of things did Charles do? What was his, you know?
Well, he was the first Aboriginal person in Australia to graduate from university, and he led the freedom rides in New South Wales in the 1960s, and he just always fought for the rights of Aboriginal people in this country. Well, the freedom rides were bus rides taken by students at the Sydney University through outback New South Wales, and the students went to the towns to expose the extent of racism and discrimination against Aboriginal people. So even in the 1960s, Aboriginal kids couldn't swim at the local swimming pools, couldn't go into a shop and try on a dress without being, you know, frowned upon, and so on and so forth.
I have experienced racism here in Australia all my life, and I believe in taking action against racism and breaking down those barriers. I believe that, but not all Australians are racist. Not all Australians are racist. My wife is a white woman. She's not racist, but there are a majority, I'd say, of Aboriginal, of white people in this country at the moment have a racist attitude towards us because they've been misinformed, and by the activities of the government. We can work, but when you go down into Alice Springs and have a look, the employment in those shops and that will reflect society. You will not find one Aboriginal person working in the shops here in Alice Springs. And that shows the world what Alice Springs and Australia is like towards the Indigenous peoples. That's my daughter's dog, a little miniature fox terrier to keep the snakes away, eh? That's Yaya.
And that means sister.
My wife Janine's great-grandmother, and that's my great-grandfather, Kuruton. Note how he's broken the kangaroo leg to balance it when he got to walk a long way. And that's my grandmother. Her name was Gingerwarra. She was one of 4 wives belonging to this old man. His name is Bill Little. And that's my mother's uncle. They're brother and sister. There's a sister to that man there. And he was the grandfather, my mum's grandfather. You young people got dreadlocks. See them dreadlocks there? Them dreadlocks from ancient times, eh? I'm very proud of the history of my family. Up here, that's me as a young man, and that was our Mandela. His name is Charlie Perkins. Charlie was our leader. I'm proud to say that I was Charlie's angel too. This is the time of year now that we go out and make young men in the ceremonies. The young men have to go through the initiations here this time of the year. Women also do their ceremonies, but men, we do our ceremonies this time of the year. It is who we are, it is our being, and we have a right as human beings to maintain our culture. What the intervention and the quarantining was attacking our cultural practices. They went and said really bad things. What we do to young people when they come with their grandfathers and their uncles and their brothers. They said really bad things. That's entrenching the racist white people of this land's belief on us.
Yeah, we're going to camp here tonight in the creek bed. Soft sand, it's good for the back.
It's a lot of flies, man.
These flies are going to get even worse tomorrow. So, yeah.
The ceremony these young fellas are going to go through soon, there was an article in the Australian newspaper saying that Aboriginal men are taking young boys out into the bush and molesting them while they're in the bush, which is not true. We can't do that here. In our culture, if any man was to do that, well, it'll get a big trouble. And Aboriginal trouble, not white people's trouble. Only place will save them is jail.
We grew up from the ground. We didn't grow up from a 4-bedroom house. This is where we grew up. This is where me and my grandfather. We were born in the creek. We wasn't born in a hospital, and we loved living in the creek.
Yeah, tell him. Hey, land, if you run, land, if you run, you want the Barabandra, you want the Barabandra, land, if you run, land, if you run, you want the Barabandra, you want the Barabandra, land, if you run, land, if
The kangaroo cooks itself in its own blood. That's him.
Keep us strong.
Feels very good for me as a young person to learn that sort of culture of our old people before it starts slowly being lost.
Australians who come here and colonise this country had no fucking culture. They've got a Ned Shelley culture. And they've got cultures that were brought in Australia from other countries. And we've always had our own culture and language.
That's what we cook. It's our bush tucker. We live in the desert. We like a meal.
Identity and culture is our very being. For so long in Australia, governments and white people in churches and so on have tried to tell us who we are and whether we're Aboriginal or not, and whether our culture is pagan or unchristian or non-Christian, and they tried for so long to beat it out of us, but we have decided that our culture is more important, and we will look after our culture. And if we identify as Aboriginal people, we're accepted as Aboriginal people, and our community accepts us, then that's it. There's no question about who we are.
Now we're going over to this small camp over here, and my father over here, he lives there, and he's been living there since he's born, and he's well into his 60s. He's my dad's brother, and I don't call him uncle, I call him father, and that's just a form of respect. Morning.
Morning.
This is my dad, father, Comet Official.
Living inside, making just an airport, madder than the top.
These sheets of iron are made by 44-gallon drums.
Yeah.
How many people live in here?
Well, a couple of people shipped back in the station.
Do a lot of Aboriginal people live like this?
Yeah. Some living outside that river there. Big mob there again.
So most of the Aboriginal people live like this?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Is this what they call it? Would they call this a town?
This is a community, an Aboriginal community.
This is an Aboriginal community?
Yep.
Yeah. Living in rubbish house.
This is the kitchen. So there's no form of electricity here, no running water. There's one tap over there in the corner for everyone to use.
And this is Australia.
And this is Australia. I think, particularly in the Northern Territory, We haven't had the support to learn how to live, or to have the opportunity to have 4 brick walls, a roof over the head, and make that smooth transition into how normal Australians live now.
Aboriginal people have been immensely marginalised from mainstream society in every way you can think of. In education, where they had schools at all, you had a curriculum specially designed for Aboriginal people up to the age of grade 3, up to, in many parts of Australia, up to even the 1960s. Equal education now. Secondly, in employment, it was very difficult for Aboriginal people to get jobs, because the reaction was, but they won't stay here, they won't hold their jobs down, they'll won't turn up to work, they'll be drunk, all sorts of prejudices like that.
Back in the 1800s, only the white person was allowed to buy alcohol and drink in the bar. These days, I'm allowed to buy alcohol and I drink in public places. And they say I'm not allowed to drink in public places. And the public place is really my home. And the coppers come here and hassle me and they say, go home. How can I go home when I'm home?
Like mother and father, uncle, brother, they just start drinking, and I will start learning from them up, and because I can't stop drinking no more.
People, especially like Australian people, say, yeah, Aboriginal people drink a lot. I mean, before you point a finger at somebody else, take a good look at yourself.
I'm an art coordinator. I work at Art Centre University.
You work at the Art Centre?
Yeah, and like me, I travel overseas. I've been to America a couple of times and last year. And I see different when I go to America and I see black people. And they're right. They call me sister. Like sister and brother. And when I come back here and I see white people here, and last night I went to the pub. They told us to go away. They were racist. They called the police and we got locked up last night.
My people have been walking around in this great country, what you call Australia, before the laws that come from England. I'm not England. I'll never be England. Because I'm original, Aboriginal. They sing this song that every time they sing, I say, waltzing Matilda, waltzing. I'm not waltzing Matilda. I am in the region, Malping, my songs are different than England. That's why I can never be England.
I think the issue with alcohol abuse and drug abuse stems from a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And what's the point if there's no sense of having any choice about the future and the quality of life that our people live? When they're constantly denied access to full-time employment and educational outcomes are extremely poor, health outcomes are, way below those of so-called third world countries, and housing is just deplorable. So, you know, you've got really fundamental basic needs that exist in our communities that have not been met by any government of any persuasion in this country.
Why do a lot of Aboriginal people sit down on the side of the streets and stuff?
Oh, they enjoy sitting in the street, meeting up with families and talking, or maybe they need to update their information at the Centrelink office. This is Centrelink. Centrelink is a government agency that deals with Social Security. From Aunt Nancy. Aggie, morning. Did you just go into Centrelink?
I just come out from Centrelink.
Okay.
Trying to go home now.
Yeah, you can jump in here if you like, you two.
Right?
Yep.
Tangentyere, you want Tangentyere?
Oh, Tangentyere, okay.
Yeah.
So what'd you do in Centrelink today? Oh,
nothing to eat. So they would tell me I got
Oh. So your money has been quarantined. The government has set your money aside.
Yeah.
And what did they say to you? Did they tell you that your pension's cut in half?
Yeah.
And
we're not getting food order.
Okay, yeah.
And the rent.
Are you happy about your pension being quarantined, half of it?
Yeah.
You happy?
Yeah, I'm happy.
If you're on Social Security benefits, 50% of your, say, $400 is automatically quarantined to be spent at the community store. None of your money is allowed to be spent on gambling, alcohol, or tobacco. So you're not allowed to buy a packet of cigarettes with your money. If you do, 100% of your income support can be quarantined. It is the most racist, reprehensible decision and law that has been made in Australia, and to make these laws, the Australian government had to suspend the operations of the Racial Discrimination Act in order to enact this racist legislation, and they did it.
Okay, Aggie, you want to go to, how much is it? Show me your voucher.
$50.
$50. Okay, you can, we're going to take Aggie to our shop. Our shop is what we set up years ago, so our tank campers have got somewhere to shop. Imposing a system like this on a set of people, on us, is wrong, and we said it's wrong, and we don't think it's going to make any difference to the lives of Aboriginal people. It must be developed by Aboriginal people if it's to work, and our system has worked well for years for us.
How is it that you've got a lot of Aboriginal people that live on the street, that aren't on the streets?
Oh, they are, but that's just the way we are. You know, you might see lots of Aboriginal people out in the street, and that's the way we are, you know, that's who we are.
But isn't it drink related or alcohol?
No, you can see lots of people who you know, I'm a non-drinker, some of my kids are non-drinkers, but we like to sit and mix with families and other people in town, and, you know, that's the way we want to do things. Morning! Morning. Did you want to go to Little Sisters? Yeah. Okay, then yeah, I can give you a list. Yeah. Yep. You ready? What house number at Little Sisters you live at? Number 2 or number 3? Hey? All right. We're entering Little Sisters now. This your house? Okay. You got everything? Yeah, thank you.
some camps that need a lot of work done on it. We've only got 2 places that don't have leases. You must have a lease to be able to qualify for government funding to get housing and infrastructure and you know, good living conditions there.
People sleep outdoors because there's no air conditioning, no electric now. Pretty hot with the tin sheds and all that, and we sleep outside. That's where we sleep now. That's the kitchen.
This is your kitchen?
Yeah, this is the kitchen. And this is a tin shed where we live in. 15 or 16 people live here. Oh, yeah, they drink. I mean, we drink. And we got no good houses to live in, like brick houses and good street lights. We got nothing to live with it, but that's the way I look at it. Because we don't get no job around here too. We didn't worry about it much, so we just keep going, living in a tin shed.
Australia wants to be seen as a progressive, Western, modern, democratic, fair-go society. Except it doesn't want anybody to focus on, all they're interested in Aboriginal people is Aboriginal art, you know, and Kathy Freeman, or, you know, if she can win a gold medal for Australia, you know, they only like the success stories. They don't like anything that appears to be tainting the so-called reputation of Australia.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Darwin, where the local time is 25 minutes past 1.
In our small showroom in here, we have the dot style art, which is investment art, where the dot style comes from the central desert areas of Australia. People buy it for investment because the artists become very famous and the price of their art goes up and up and up. But at the moment they're now just starting to implement where they get paid like unemployment benefits each week. When they get that, they just spend it on grog. They don't buy their kids food. They don't buy nutritional foods for their kids, which is going to last 2 weeks until the next time they get money. They don't have the ability to think that far. So now what the government's starting to introduce is certain percentages of their money can only be spent in certain stores on the communities to buy food and clothing for their children and women. They don't understand the concept of money. It's like a hose with water coming out of it. And when it stops, they say, right, who turned the hose off? Why did it stop? They don't understand that. They're very primitive people. Here they are, a bunch of Aboriginal people by the Australian government's right, just give them money and that will keep them quiet, you know. There's a lot of communities that are dry and there's a lot of wet. A lot of the dry communities, all the people are moving into the city areas where they can get access to alcohol every day. It's not like you and I will come home from work and have a beer. They will get up in the morning and just drink all day, anything they can get. $2, right, I'll get alcohol with it. And it's just such a bad problem. And it's because it's a hot environment, you're always thirsty, and the territory has always been a male-orientated place where people just drink and drink and drink. They won't go out and fish and hunt anymore because they don't need to, because the government supplies them money to go and buy things. But those things that they're buying are not necessarily the best things for their nutritional health.
Was there real issues of child abuse within the communities?
Oh, in the communities, yeah, within the Aboriginal race, yeah. On a scale that we would never get to see. because it's out there in the bush, in the communities, isolated, mainly only just 1 or 2 families living in a house. No one ever gets to see or hear about it, and half the time they're drunk anyway. Like I say, they're one of the most primitive races on earth, and they have not learnt that. They have not climbed the ladder and understood that. And now that they're integrated with white people, the white people are now saying, oh, wait on, this is not acceptable in this day and age and in this society. It has to change. I became involved in Aboriginal art because I used to sell hats at markets, and Aboriginal people just started bringing their product to me every day and saying, do you want to buy this? And I started buying it and reselling it to tourists. And then I had a great interest in the sound of the didgeridoo, and I bought one and then started playing them, and then Aboriginal people would come to my shops and we would sit under the trees and they'd teach me traditional rhythms, and I became totally involved in it. This didgeridoo that I'm going to play here is probably one of the best didgeridoos in the world, but I have a motto: the best didgeridoo in the world, there's always one better and there's always one worse. And I have that same motto with people.
French. Yeah, I'm a modern artist. Modern me. But this is traditional art. I do something different. But my ancestors paint all these. The art world is woken up and saw the magnificence in these paintings and truly value these at the right price. And $80,500 is just a normal price for a painting like these. The symbols of circles and wavy lines change according to the story. That could be a spring, or it could be a dwelling, or that could be a river, or that could be sand hills. So they have different meanings and symbols according to the painting or the story that's written for it. My parents found it difficult to raise all our children, so the government saw it a different way and said my parents weren't capable. So we were taken from my parents and placed into an institution in Adelaide. I spent several years there until I was fostered into a white family, a Christian family, until I was about 18. But fortunately I won a scholarship to go to art school, so it was my own drive and energy that made me. And maybe the isolation of being away from my people made me do it, because I didn't want to feel that I was incapable of doing anything. I designed the flag. I wanted to show our presence, so I thought of the idea that a flag should show us visibly in the community when we march down the street. It was a flag for our identity of who we are, how we see ourselves. And when you look at the colours, I chose carefully, and the colours red represents the red ochre. I used the colour yellow because it represents the sun, and I've used the colour black. And that was about our identity. Be proud of your colour, your culture, who you are. I read Malcolm X's diaries. Anything that would express the will of the black man. The positive energy that came out of the Black Power movement was a necessary factor for us to raise ourselves and be proud and be strong of who we are. Australia espouses to be a country where fair go is their catchphrase, but it's not working. and it doesn't overflow into the black community. So the intervention really is intervention into the pride and integrity of the Aboriginal people.
We purchase all the art off the artists. They get what I'd consider a fair rate.
You've got quite a few famous artists that pass through. You've got
David Gulpilil, yeah, comes and does painting. Been painting off and on through this shop, out the front, upstairs for about 3 years. I wouldn't say he's prolific, but he does some beautiful artworks.
Too much cigarette and too much alcohol and, you know, and all that drugs and all that things, you know. Yeah. But I wanted to, you know, slow down or stop or, you know, because it's been a long time.
Yeah, and you got a house.
I shouldn't touch the drug. I shouldn't touch cigarette. You know what I mean?
I'll see you soon, David.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'll see you now.
See ya.
I'll be here.
All right. Ciao.
I'm an actor, and I started with John Lennon's and Jimi Hendrix and Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali's and all these people when I was in Los Angeles and Hollywood and all these things. They all the famous people, and I became famous because when I went to the Hollywood. All I do, I make films, and then I come, and then I pay tax, and then I run out of money, and then I have to go to doll. And if I go to doll, I still pay tax, and that's no job. So I had to come right back in here, sit down and do some painting. And only way that I can earn the money, maybe $25, $30, $50, well, is because that's the game they playing here in Australia.
You are the best Aborigines movie star, and that everybody knows in you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I'm about to go there and another drink. David, I'll sit on here. No.
He wants you to paint a picture of law, like Aboriginal law.
Yeah, anytime, yes.
Actually, how much do you charge for a picture like this?
Oh, I don't know.
Come on. Give me the price.
Yeah.
Tell me. How much is a picture like this?
$300-400 or something like that, you know.
For the 3 pictures?
Yeah.
Så jag har
very expensive, David.
All right. They asked me to street painting, so I'll do the street painting for them because I got no money. And I said, okay. It's not the right price, good price. Some people, they rip me off all times. Even though I'm making a movie and a film, they still peanut cheap, you know.
The Aboriginals in Alice Springs are moving to South Australia. They get away from the intervention laws, so they can drink freely.
But you guys are drinking freely. You drink here, they drink in bars.
I don't want to be
What's the
racist.
difference? They don't drink in bars, you don't see Aboriginal bars, so they drink in bars. What's the difference?
The difference is we're civilised. That's the difference.
The ones that are drinkers, it's been reported a lot more of them into pedophilia and bashing their wives than white drinkers.
I disagree that you know there's more of one or the other. Do you know what I mean? Like,
We're only getting fed what the media tells us.
yeah, that's exactly right.
You know? So we can only go off that. There's no real statistic. It's just what the media tells us and what they want us to hear.
laid back, relaxed. Everyone has a good time, a dance. It kicks ass better than anywhere else in Australia, mate. That's all I can say.
What do you think then about the intervention in the quarantine laws?
Quarantine laws? I don't know anything about it. I don't know.
That's the problem about Australia. They don't know anything about it. They don't know anything about it.
I've never heard of the intervention.
I've been living in Perth for the last 5 years and I've only just moved up last week.
It's on the national news though. You know what happened?
What?
In June 2007, they decided that Aboriginal people were not able to look after themselves.
So are you from the Northern Territory?
I've been here 20 years.
You've been from the NT for
20 years, yeah.
Okay, so have you been to the remote localities?
Yeah, that's where I work. I've been there 20 years. I'm working out bush.
Just because of the colour of your skin, you should not be disadvantaged.
No.
And I'm sorry, but it was white people who came here 200 odd years ago and said, you live by our fucking laws. Fuck your laws that you've lived by for 40,000 years. And by the way, here's some grog. Get it into you.
Do you want to know where grandmother is from? Yeah. My grandmother is from Sweden.
Drinking in moderation is good for you. I drink a fair bit. I'd have probably 6-pack a night, which I don't know what that classifies me. You might call me alcoholic, but I don't feel that way. I still go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. What annoys me is how Aboriginals freeload in a sense. They stand there, they get given taxpayers' money. Generally they spend it on alcohol. Generally they spend it on alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs.
Why are you talking shit?
There's such a vast difference. Like, white people drink to have fun. I think Aboriginals mostly drink to evade reality, so it's very different. You can't compare them, man. That's why you have specific laws like that are for Aboriginal and Indigenous communities compared to like Caucasian and like civilised communities.
Darwin's a small town. I can go out once every 3 months and I'll still catch up with the same people drinking every single weekend. Drinking is going to be part of Australian culture, particularly part of Darwin culture. I mean, you look at the stats and it...
What do you think about the intervention and quarantine laws that's prohibit Aboriginals from drinking?
I don't know enough about it to comment on it. Look, we've got to look at ourselves as a white culture and as an Indigenous culture and come to some sort of agreement. We're sick of it. We're sick of Aboriginals claiming whatever the fuck they claim, and we're sick of white people being racist and derogatory towards all Aboriginal people because, you know, we've got to move on. We're meant to be the multicultural society of the world, and...
Are you?
Well, no. We're fucking proving ourselves not.
Mandurah is the largest Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory. If they're going to spend money anywhere, you'd think it would be here. But if you look outside the window, what you see is government underspending. You see overcrowded housing, 20, 25 people to a house. You see minimal investment in the development of enterprises that leads to employment. If you think about the abuse of children, there are two recognised factors that lead to that, and they are overcrowded housing and high levels of unemployment. A civilised government should start by addressing those two issues. There's much said in Australia about the massive amounts of money that are spent in Aboriginal communities. In fact, the reality is the massive amounts of money that need to be spent that aren't. That is the root cause of that problem.
What's it like living here?
To me, when I come in, it's not good, you know. I can't explain properly. To me, fighting, people having problem with food.
With food?
What do you mean people have keep running out of money to buy it. There's everything going on.
Why do people
children are sick.
Why do people run out of money?
Because they buy smoke and drink.
It's a problem of this house. Government don't give us decent house. Because there's lots of people staying in this house.
How many people live in this house?
More than 20. Many. Some sleep in the kitchen.
Some sleep outside the tent. Use the tent.
This is my kitchen outside, and that's toilet and laundry and shower.
Yeah, on the floor they sleep with net.
My husband and I, and also 4 children sleeping in this room.
So you have 6 people sleeping?
Yes.
Mandurah is a very strong, vibrant and dynamic community. There is a strong connection to land, language and culture that many people work very hard to preserve. And of course, where you see the very worst problems in Indigenous Australia, they are in places where connections with land, language and culture have broken down. A certain way to fail in the implementation of programs in Aboriginal Australia is to do things for and about Aboriginal people without talking to them. And that is what the former government, the Howard government, was guilty of in Australia. Many cynical commentators believe that the intervention was a politically motivated stunt for the former government to get a boost in the election polls, not based on any serious concern for the children.
Then why hasn't the new Rudd government rolled back the intervention? Why have they not reversed that policy?
The Rudd government, when they were in opposition before the election, supported the intervention, and they probably have some difficulty in overturning policies that they supported quite publicly at that time.
There's no question that there are many different points of view about the intervention, but Labor, before the election, when we were in opposition, did support it because of the horrific levels of child abuse identified in so many communities in different parts of remote Northern Territory. We thought it was essential to act. We thought it was essential to make sure that the police that didn't exist in these communities were brought in to provide the sort of safety and security that the rest of us expect in urban and regional Australia, to make sure that the controls on alcohol were implemented, the controls on access to pornographic material, to make sure that welfare payments were spent in the interests of children. So yes, we do support it because we have terrible levels of child abuse in these communities, and it's essential that action is taken.
For the past 6 months I've been working as a coordinator for the combined Aboriginal organisations here in the Northern Territory. That coalition came together in response to the federal government's announcement about the intervention here in the NT. We were extremely concerned that there seemed to be so many elements that were encompassed, if you like, in the total package of measures that were to be introduced here, one of which was about the compulsory acquisition of Aboriginal land, We fail to understand why the seizure of Aboriginal land and assets would have anything to do with protection of children. We also fail to understand why things such as the removal of the permit system, that is, the requirement that visitors to Aboriginal land must go to a land council or to a governing body to seek permission to enter Aboriginal land, why that needed to be revoked or taken away, given that many people have relied on the permits as a way of protecting access to country and controlling who visits and enters Aboriginal land. So there were various elements to the whole intervention that we found was somewhat inconsistent with what might have been proposed if we were really serious about dealing with child protection issues. I think for many foreign visitors and overseas journalists and governments, there is an absolute bewilderment about what the hell goes on here in Australia. Many people I know personally, for example, see Australia as a very wealthy first world nation, very sophisticated country in lots of ways, and yet cannot understand why there is this level of socio-economic disadvantage and impoverishment of Aboriginal people for the most basic of things. It begs the question, what is it about Australia that we can't come to grips with this? We're actually talking about, at best, maybe 500,000 people. This is not tens of millions of people that we would have to deal with in a country that was impoverished or suffering from the ravages of AIDS. This is a wealthy first world country. We can do it. We have the resources, we have the capacity. What we've been absolutely lacking has been the political will and the commitment to see this through.
We don't see that this intervention is at all about addressing the problem of child abuse, but is about controlling Aboriginal lives and land. It needs to actually be campaigned against and makes a clear call for people to actually challenge it.
We don't have to put up with any more of these crappy policies that turn up all the time that affect our people, as oppressive policies. We have to deal with leadership here for our people.
It's time that us all, we got to stand together, not only the people in the cities, out in the bush, down the ground, grassroots.
We put in all this work to try and get there and to show publicly, to not just to the government itself, but to the whole of Australia, that we're not going to sit still anymore.
Beautiful flag. It's about Sorry Day. It's a start. It's a start, I mean, at least the government has shown some interest towards Aboriginal issues here, which never happened before.
22 of us, including 3 children, travelled down from Alice Springs over 3,000 kilometres to get here, and it took us 2.5 days and 2 nights sleep on the road. I think it's worth it. We've got a lot of support from the rest of the nation, and we're all meeting inside now.
Next we'd like to invite to the podium a very special guest, the ambassador from Venezuela. Would like to say a few words about Indigenous peoples and rights, and I would like to welcome him to the podium now to address this meeting. Thank you, please.
It's not just here in Australia that we're organised or that Indigenous people are organising the struggle.
Yo deseo que todos los planteamientos de ustedes tengan un feliz término.
I wish you a very successful and happy outcome with all the determinations of this meeting.
Se ha abierto un debate en Australia sobre la importancia de las luchas indígenas.
You are opening a very important debate about the about Indigenous issues within Australia.
In the Northern Territory they have created the perfect apartheid. Call a spade a spade. And that's what they've done.
The major objective of this alliance is to promote the voice of Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islander peoples at the national level for the purpose of protecting our collective rights.
We're making history, we're fighting yet another government policy, and we're back in the political arena trying to get the best outcomes for our mob, the Aboriginal people.
This is my first time in Canberra where there is an actual protest taking place, and I reckon it's great.
We're sick and tired of people in Armani suits coming out after a free lunch and drinking all our imported wine and telling us that they're sorry when it's a token gesture.
Now, when we talk about the land grabbing, and a lot of people touched on the minerals underneath the earth, but when you look at the 10 camps within the township, they're prime real estate. And that's what they're after. They're after our land. When you look at 10 camps when they first developed, they were on the outskirts and the fringes of the towns. Now, as the towns swell up, it grows. We're now in eyesight of tourists, of anyone living in that town.
If we don't stop it now, it will flow on. We need to make policies for ourselves. We need Aboriginal control over Aboriginal affairs, and that's why we're all here together, to stop this intervention. We're going to meet the PM of New Zealand, Murray Party.
Bonnie Harawira.
Yep.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Hello.
Hello.
Did you come?
Hey, mate.
Kia ora. Hello. So, thanks for coming. Where's your army?
I haven't done anything yet. I just got off the plane. Yeah. The rights of Indigenous people and the struggles of Indigenous peoples are the same the world over. That's why I'm here, to show our support for what they've got going on over here.
This flag belongs to us. This represents the Northern Territory, all around. Aboriginal is all around. And also we came here for visit Parliament House for sorry.
I had a dream, there's Rod there. And Rod's going to be standing like this with his hands, fingers crossed behind his back, and he's going to say, sorry. And all these parliamentary fellas, they're going to have their ears crossed and their fingers crossed too. Like this say, geez, I hope them fellas buy that. Because there's a lot of shit, we all know it. There's a lot of shit.
That, all the Australian public's going to say, oh, we said sorry to them, what are they whinging about now? So still got to keep the pressure up in not just one way, but in many ways.
Aboriginal 10 embassies to the sacred fire. We're going to be marching up the hill today, and we're going to be telling Kevin Rudd that this is our country, that even he has to give permission to be here.
We apologise, especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country. For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry. We today take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to a future that embraces all Australians. A future where this Parliament resolves that the injustices of the past must never, never happen again. A future where we harness the determination of all Australians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to close the gap that lies between us and life expectancy, educational achievement and economic opportunity. There comes a time in the history of nations when their peoples must become fully reconciled to their past if they have to go forward with confidence to embrace their future. Between 1910 and 1970, between 10 and 30% of Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their mothers and fathers. That as a result, up to 50,000 children were forcibly taken from their families. That this was the product of the deliberate, calculated policies of the state as reflected in the explicit powers given to them under statute. One of the most notorious examples of this approach was from the Northern Territory Protector of Natives, who stated, and I quote, "Generally by the fifth and invariably by the sixth generation, all native characteristics of the Australian Aborigine are eradicated. The problem of our half-castes, to quote the Protector, will quickly be eliminated by the complete disappearance of the black race and the swift submergence of their progeny in the white," unquote. To the stolen generations, I say the following. As Prime Minister of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Government of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Parliament of Australia, I am sorry. And I offer you this apology without qualification. We apologise for the hurt, pain and suffering we, the Parliament,
I think it's long overdue. I think it's very necessary for us to move forward and to understand the pain and hurt and the loss that these people have suffered.
Well, you can't really redo what already happened, but it's a start.
I guess for my mother, who's been dead over 30 years, I guess for her, she's at peace. That's all she would have wanted to hear what was happening today. But I guess there's a lot more to be done. An apology is only the beginning.
It is a tremendous step that has been taken through the apology. It's not the complete answer to everything, but it's a huge burden that's been lifted. The fact that it was made nationally and in the Parliament, I think it sends clearly the message that Australia has operated on racist policies and has sought to destroy the Aboriginal society. It failed to do that, and as a consequence we have all these other problems that we now are going to have to deal with. The intervention is really now a despairing act of governments that have no longer been prepared to sit down and work through with Indigenous leaders strategies and processes that will help to respond to the crises that we all know that are in our communities. Alcohol is a problem for all Australians. Drug taking is a problem for all Australians. Child abuse is a problem for all Australians. It's not just in the Indigenous communities. So we've got to find solutions that are about the nation.
This is where I sleep, under the Milky Way.